Gruff, we're just coming to the end of the third week of pre-season. How's it going so far? What are your thoughts initially?
To be fair, as usual, there's a real vibrancy around the place. Pre-season and some of the things we're doing from a physical point of view with Alex Lawson coming in, from a technical point of view in terms of pushing our skill development work is all dovetailing nicely. We're starting to add the rugby structures, a couple of little tweaks, and where we want to just adapt a few of our patterns of play per se, and our understanding of phase play is starting to come together with again a group that's got a different spectrum of ages. Some of the older experienced guys adding real value, but then you get some of the young fresh boys coming in for probably the first time in some cases.
Maybe a little bit painful, but look back at last season, it promised so much for so long, but it seemed to go wrong in the closing months of the season. Now with the benefit of a couple of months distance, what are your thoughts looking back on the way the season went?
Yeah, it was deeply disappointing, for us and everyone associated with the region, and we're duty bound to look at all aspects of our game and where and why. There's things we fell down on, and we've obviously done that in terms of our work as coaches, and done a lot of work with the players in that. And in looking back at each and every game, I think the obvious thing to say is around the turnover rate is too high. But what we've got to look at then is what happens after the turnovers, where they become compound errors because of deficiencies elsewhere, and also what's leading up to that point as well. So it's really important that we've looked at our aspect of decision making. Big focus for me is our ability to run, pass, or kick, and as I said, it's something that we've got to look at around how we move our attacking structures on. Because in terms of our turnover rate, we started to perhaps having a superficial confidence that we could keep playing, and it was reckless at time. And as I said, I don't point the finger at individual players per se, it's a collective, and us as coaches within that, we've got to give them the tools to understand when to run, pass or kick. There's games we clearly ignored kick space and the smart things to do. As I said, then you get punished thereafter around the next phase of play, and you're defending in areas we shouldn't really be defending if we're perhaps a more mature, rounded game. And also had a ball carrying game to sort of complement that, and I think we were really scratching around and looking for things tactically within certain games. The Leinster, Ulster, we were thereabouts, and obviously they were good performances that went to the last, but deep down associated with that there was a real disappointment around a few games in particular.
Talking around the disappointment of a few games, no doubt you're looking at some of the end of the season defeats, the Scarlets and the Blues, defeats that have left a scar in the minds of supporters, but as coaches I don't think you can dwell too much on local rivalries and defeats in derby matches. You've got to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, you do. I think it was unusual for us in that traditionally I've certainly never lost 2 derby games in a season, and that does hurt, and you've got to take that on the chin and again look for rugby reasons why within those games. There is the bigger picture then around the league, and even when we've been winning those games we've tried to judge ourselves on finishing positions and what we aspire to. But as I said, I look for rugby reasons within those games. Is also seeing how sides were defending us. We were statistically the best line-out attack team for much of the year in terms of where we caused opposition real problems, but we get into a point where teams defended us differently, defended us perhaps smarter in terms of snuffing things out, and we should have been and could have been adapting better to those situations. And again, it's around the tools you give players and things that we players have got to adapt to on that field of play. And I think the Blues game in particular, how they went off our line out, our Leinster and Scarlets then in particular, not just the set piece but how they defended after. And I think we as other teams did fell into the trap against them, and we've got to give the tools to our team to be more rounded about where and how do we play through, around, or into other places around the field, and that includes the kicking game.
It's always difficult to talk about hindsight, but with the benefit of hindsight, as a coaching group, would you have approached those games a little bit differently perhaps, or would you have done anything differently?
You're in the midst of it really, and I think the Treviso game, I think it did jolt us a little bit, and you want to keep backing certain things that you're doing, and for a lot of the time you've done well. So you keep going with a bit of continuity to the start game. Then you get a high turnover rate, and there's a bit of fear that exists, even though superficially the confidence is still there. You know that any turnover is probably going to cost you a hell of a lot of field position because of our compound errors around other things. So then there's a natural conservative comes in. And as I said, around the Ulster-Leinster games, you could perhaps justify that, but it probably wasn't enough in terms of what we were coaching as a whole package to be able to go to Thomond Park. And even though there are aspects of pressure that we put on Munster that I liked at certain points, we didn't really look to have enough efficiency or confidence to really go there and deliver the performance.
Looking ahead rather than back, you've raised a few concerns about the end of last season without wanting to give too much away and spoil anything going into the new season. What can you do differently? How can you change things this season?
Well, as always, as a coach, as a backs coach and as an attack coach for the team, trying to challenge the decision making of players. I think we want players to be able to think on their feet, understand pictures, communicate those pictures and interact accordingly. But within that sort of ideology, we've got to give them a framework of play that gives them the opportunity to understand where they are on the pitch, what they see in front of them, and then, as I said, to run, pass or kick. So perhaps a framework with footballers on the field to complement that in the right positions that can put us into better areas, and to complement some of the speed we've got on the field and the power players that I think that we really need to perhaps complement the game we try and play. And again, from a backs perspective, there's perhaps a couple, without making excuses, we did miss as the season panned out, not just in the backs, but how we need to develop our carrying game as well.
And a couple of additions to the back line for the season. James Hook is already here. Corey Allen's back in next week. How are you looking forward to working with those?
Yeah, really looking forward to it. I mean, obviously I've been with Hookie the last couple of weeks, and nice to sit down with him and see his view on the game, his experiences at Perpignan, and especially Gloucester recently I found really interesting, and things that have worked for him there, things that haven't worked for him and the team, and drawing on those experiences. But him then understanding what we want from him in terms of where they'll be positionally, and where that regardless of the number, what he's going to add in terms of his skill set to play the game we want, and to get the best out of people around him. That's the challenge for James. And then within that, Cordy comes in. He is one of those guys who's going to be hopefully getting the best out of himself by understanding how he can play effectively off people like James Hook, Sam Davis, Dan Bigger, Owen Watkin, Ashley Beck. There's a lot of football there. It's about meshing the right balance between the back line.
It was interesting with Corey. Perhaps went a little bit under the radar when we announced the sign-in, but having seen what he could do with Wales over the summer, perhaps whetted the appetite a little bit of some supporters who were a little bit underwhelmed, shall we say, when the signing was announced back in the spring. Yeah,
I guess so. I mean, there's some great feedback recently from the Welsh coaches in terms of what he delivered on that tour, from training and through to the games, as you say. And I think with Corey, he had to sit with myself and then Steve separately in terms of what's your motivation, what are you going to add to the Ospreys. So it wasn't just about us looking at a guy who's going to fit things that we do, but needed to know his motivation and ambition was in the right place. And so seeing how he's started the summer with Wales, that excites me, and it excites me around how captivated he is about coming in and wanting to get on with his work here with something to prove. And I think he's done that around a wing slot for Wales, which was a little bit different perhaps, but that shows his potential as an athlete and something that we can tap into as well.
And looking at some of the other boys in the back line, you've got a lot of exciting youngsters who got a lot of promise and a lot of potential. People know Kieran Giles, who's going to be continuing his development this season. Owen Watkin, it's a bit of a forgotten man if you're injured, but still very, very young, and he's back up and running. And the likes of Joe Thomas, even Kieran Williams, boys who promise to excite supporters if they get the opportunity.
Yeah, they do, and it's about bringing them through at the right rate and with the right people around them. Keelan's had an extraordinary 12 to 18 months, and we've got to keep nurturing and developing and exploring how we're going to push his game to a next level, and having to deal with a couple of other sort of physical things that we've got to work with to maximise him, because we didn't always get that chance last year, because of necessity really. But the athletic prowess is there on the guys you've mentioned. I want to keep pushing the footballing ability of those, the ability to run, pass or kick, and that's where someone like Owen can come into it with the right people around him. And I think, again, not going too fast with everything we're doing all the time with some of these young athletes, but taking stock at certain periods of the year. I think we can really see these guys thrive. Some in the short term, some might be a little bit longer. Keelan's had a couple of injury problems recently, missed the World Cup, but that's given us the benefit of getting some work in behind the scenes, and again, someone we can push to develop his skills framework, but also know what he's good at as well. And I think that's what we've got to tap into and add to his defensive game. Joe as well is worth a name check for, you know, the new contract was thoroughly deserved around the bick work and foot speed. And let's talk about the balance of people like him and Fonatia. You know, that's really important to us.
And then finally, in summary, kind of, you're a rugby thinker. You enjoy thinking deeply about the game and about all aspects of rugby tactically. Looking to this season and beyond, how excited are you about what potentially could be doing with the Ospreys backline and where you can take the game over the next 12, 18 months, 24 months?
Yeah, I mean, I really want to push the footballing ability of the Ospreys backline, not just this group, but I see a wave coming through. You know, I think the game, you know, thrives on and needs, you know, football in any side in the world. I think that's got to be tempered by a power base and having the balance between both, and that's what excites me, that I think that we've got a group of forwards as well that we can challenge, you know, to be more rounded rugby players, but without getting away from the relationship that I've got with Clarkey in terms of how we can really push them to be better from the source of possession, you know, delivering that and what comes next, and being smart with it, as I said, around who we play and why we do things.